Guys, it is Aoife from Fred VC Died Laughing and I'm here with my weekly wrap up. It is a lovely Octobery day today. It is cold. I have my cup of tea and I am ready to talk about books. So most of the books I read this week were for Spookathon, which was hosted by Books and Lala. I will have a vlog coming up during the week of that. But the first book that I read, I started a couple of days before Spookathon started and I finished it during Spookathon, and that was Imaginary Friend by Chbosky. I got this book in exchange for an honest review from NetGalley, and this one to turn out to be a big disappointment. I am definitely on the side of people who just didn't enjoy this book. This is a kind of thriller horror book about a little boy called Christopher who moves to this new town with his mother. His mother has been in an abusive relationship and she's kind of trying to run away from that situation and trying to start fresh with her and her son, and they come to this town that seems to be this like really nice kind of small town. There's basically only one way in, one way out of it, and they think that it looks like a good place to kind of start afresh and start putting down some roots. And things seem to be going fine, and then Christopher disappears for almost a week, and when he comes back he seems to be okay, but there's little things about him that are a little bit different, and we start seeing that Christopher has basically seems to have been led astray a little bit by these strange voices and faces and imaginary things that he is seeing, and it's almost like a weird infection starts with the town, and it eventually ends up with kind of almost like a flu-like plague, and we kind of just know from Christopher that it seems kind of like the end of the world is coming as we know it kind of thing, and it seems like it's starting to really affect the town. Something is brewing, people are getting sick, people are getting angry, everyone is fighting, and things are just not good, and it's up to kind of Christopher and his mom and a few other people to try and basically figure out what is going on and save the world from what Christopher calls the hissing lady. Much more to this story than what I can kind of give you in a synopsis. This is a 700+ page book. This is a very large book, and in my opinion it was far too long. I kind of felt like things started to feel like they were starting to be wrapped up by 50%, and I couldn't figure out what was going to happen for the rest of the 50%, and it basically just was that like that last 50% was super duper drawn out, like so long. I think it was far too long. One of the things I did like with this book, and I think it's just a style, Chbosky's style, it is something he's really good at, and that is building these really lovely relationships between people. He's really good at building up these characters that you do fall in love with and that you want to root for. Christopher, his mum, Kate, the sheriff of the town, who's just like this good guy trying to help out the town and the people that he loves and cares about. Christopher's only like 7.5 years old in this book, so he's very young, he's a baby, and then he becomes friends with these other group of kids. One is called Special Ed, and then there's Mike and Matt, and they're called like the M&Ms because they're twins, both begin with M. And Special Ed, M&Ms and Christopher are just this really cute little friendship group, and Chbosky is so good at building these little units of people that you just love and you root for and have this special connection to, and I definitely felt that with this book. And again, the relationship between Christopher and his mum, oh, it's so lovely. You know that this mum would, she would kill someone for her child. She would do anything for her child. He is her life, and you really felt that with the book, and I really liked that. Kind of I guess this classic horror trope of the way some women are used in this book, and just some of the, not even just how the women are used, but just kind of the language used towards women, and every single woman seemed to have like this weird tragic backstory, or like there was something negative attached to her in some way. Like there was a woman who there's talk about her having an abortion, and it almost seems like in a way it almost seemed like it was like this really bad thing that she had done. There was a few women who've all had like kind of abusive past, some women who are abusive now towards their children because of their abusive pasts. Obviously this book has triggers for like pretty much everything. So yeah, and I have never actually read a Stephen King, but what I know of Stephen King's style of writing, this felt very classic Stephen King-esque type of writing. So I presume if you do really enjoy Stephen King, you might really enjoy this type of books. But yeah, and then there was a lot of religious undertones eventually in this book, which I wouldn't be a mad fan of. So yeah, as I said in my last wrap up, I'm kind of still exploring the horror genre, and I just think this type of horror wasn't quite for me. It just didn't click with me. I just didn't enjoy it. It was too long. The end, I think, was a bit disappointing. I was left with some questions at the end, and yeah, so I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Halloween Haunting by Kathi Daley. This is a book I picked up on Kindle Unlimited, and it was for a book I normally wouldn't read trope for the Spookathon, and this is a cozy mystery, and I don't really read cozy mysteries. I read thrillers, I read crime, but I don't read like cozy mysteries. And this is basically about a woman called Tess who was like this, I think she's like she's a postwoman, like a mail carrier, but she seems to have like a lot of other things she does in the town, and she is setting up a haunted house in the town basically to raise money for the animal shelter in the town. And they basically, while they're making the haunted house, they find a skeleton in the walls of the house. So there's this mystery, and then they don't only find a skeleton, but they also find a very recent dead body too. So there's a murder, and then there's like the skeleton that's like probably could be 100 years old. So there's a couple of mysteries to try and solve. This like was fine. I found it a little bit comedic how blasé the characters were about finding this dead body, like this very recent like dead body. They were like, oh my god, a skeleton. Oh no, a dead body. Oh, okay. And like it was just so weird. And then it was in this haunted house that they were going to like set up for the public. They found the body, and then like 2 days later they were able to continue on with the haunted house, like it wasn't a crime scene, like a murder didn't possibly happen there. It was so weird, and I was like, this would never happen. This place would be like closed off for several weeks at the least. So yeah, I was just like, okay, that's kind of weird. What I found weird was the fact that this character Tess is like a male character. She's not a detective. She's not anything to do with the police. Her brother is like the sheriff or the police officer in the town. He tells them and like other people, like citizens of the town, literally everything to do with the case and like everything that they know about the case. And it's just so like, that's not allowed. So she definitely just like sticks her nose into these cases when she's not supposed to, and she jumps to these conclusions that aren't always like really great, and she like confronts people about killing people, and it's like they have nothing to do with it, and it just like wasn't like very like in that sense, it was just quite unrealistic. There was also a very lack of dogs and animal rescues in this book. I thought there was going to be some like animal content, and there wasn't really at all. There was like one kitten rescue, and that was like it. I would have liked a little bit more like dogs and cats and stuff like that. I think maybe in the other books there are, but there just wasn't in this one, so that was a bit disappointing for me. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I absolutely loved this one. This is a book about this woman who marries a man called Maxim de Winter, and they go back to his house in Manderley, and she soon comes to realise that his previous wife, whose name was Rebecca, she died in like kind of mysterious tragic circumstances. She is very much alive in like the memories of everyone else in the house. So I just really enjoyed this as a kind of, is it a modern classic? I'm not really sure. But I just love the writing in this. I love the slow unfurling of the story. I love getting to know the characters. I really enjoy the main character. We never figure out her real name. That kind of dynamic between herself and then this like memory of this dead wife is just so interesting to read. And it's hard to figure out if like the main character, is she just, she's super paranoid, and she definitely makes things harder for herself than it has to be. And she's very like, there's no confidence in her, and you just kind of want to egg her on and shake her and be like, you were worthy, like don't, like, you know, just do your own thing, like. And she's always just judging herself, and she thinks that everyone else is like talking about her when they probably aren't at all. And she just has all these like imaginary things play in her head, and sometimes it's hard to figure out like, is this actually happening, or is this something that she is just playing in her head that she thinks other people are doing about and saying about her. I just love kind of the mystery around this as well, and around Rebecca. I just thought the house itself is like a character of its own in the story, which is brilliant. And there were loads of connections, I think, between Jane Eyre and Rebecca as well, which I really loved. And yeah, I just loved everything about this book. I gave it a really strong 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I will definitely be rereading this. I'm going to watch the movie, and I will be reading more Daphne du Maurier as well, because really enjoyed this. Next book I read was the one I DNF'd, which was Blood Captive by Kim Lorraine. This is just a very typical shitty vampire story about this woman who's like kidnapped by this vampire prince, and she's told that her blood is like super sweet and can save them from some sun sickness, and then she just wants to have sex with him all the time, even though he is always kind of like mildly threatening her, and his dad wants to eat her, and she is basically like their captive. But all she can think about is having sex with him, and how her nipples get hard every like 10 like 10 lines, well no, okay, that's an exaggeration, every like 3 pages, her nipples get hard, or like something in her vagina flutters every time she sees this vampire guy who just wants to suck her dry. And yeah, and it was really bad, and it was like every single vampire trope you could think of, every vampire cliche. There was no explanations given about anything. The author was definitely like, oh, these readers know vampires and I don't need to explain anything, and I'm like, that's not really how it works. Like, and what else was bad about this book? Yeah, pretty much everything. And then I just couldn't do it to myself any longer, so I DNF'd it at like 60%, and I gave it like 2 out of 5 stars, though maybe it should be a 1. But yeah, it was just really, really bad. It was definitely something I would have read and possibly loved when I was like 13 years old on like Miba or Quizilla or something like that, and one of those fan fiction sites. So yeah, it was really bad. And then the last full book I finished was All the Hidden Truths by Askew. This is more of a crime novel. I was describing it as a thriller. I'm not really sure if it is a thriller. So this is a book about basically the aftermath of a college shooting in Edinburgh. And we are following a detective who has taken on the case, and then we are following the kind of the aftermath with one of the victim's mothers, and then the shooter's mother, and kind of their grief, what they're going through, the questions they have, the treatment they receive from the public and from the media, and how that kind of goes. So I did really enjoy this one. I thought it was really well written, and the writing itself didn't connect to me at first, and I was a bit worried I wasn't going to like it, but I did end up quite enjoying it. I really liked this kind of, it was a slower kind of paced novel. There's not a whole load of action in it. The shooting itself happens by the first 20%, and we're only really getting we don't get like kind of first hand descriptions of the shooting. So if people are worried about that, you don't get that, but you do kind of get a description of a police officer who responded to it, and then kind of one of those media run-throughs of what happened, and who was shot first, and the victims and stuff like that. I really liked how this dealt with grief, the different types of grief, forgiveness, and it was just really interesting from that point of view, especially the fact that we did have the victim's mother or the shooter's mother, and kind of what she was going through, and I think that's a really interesting perspective to have. And like, she's just an ordinary woman, and kind of wondering how everyone's telling, and like people are trying to blame her for what happened, and then we're also as readers are wondering, did she see, because she seems to have been keeping a secret, and we're like, did she know that her son was going to do this and she didn't tell anyone? Did she have any ideas? And you know, there's kind of that kind of mystery around that. One of the things I had an issue at first, and then it kind of became a proper part of the plot of the story, so I didn't have much of an issue with it after that, was the media in this book, and a particular journalist who was just using not good means to get a story, and was very like a bully boy, and you know, just kind of the worst type of tabloid journalist that you can think of. And sometimes I get really frustrated when I'm reading these type of thrillers and books, when we're seeing the trope of a really shitty, horrible journalist, because obviously I was a journalist for a very long time, very long, like 5 years, and yeah, it kind of just annoys me sometimes when I see this trope being used of shitty media and shitty journalism, when I know for a fact, having worked such cases before, and I worked in an online newsroom, but I've worked mass shootings and school shootings in the past, and I have like read articles from journalists on the ground, really well done articles of victims, families, and people who witnesses. I have, you know, they're like, when it comes to these kind of things, like there's just so much in this that like I was like, I just don't see how some publications would publish this stuff when it's so like you can't figure out where his sources are coming from. And then there was a point where he like walked in, like the day of the shooting, this journalist like walked into the scene and was at the scene, and I was like, there's no way a respectable journalist would do that. First of all, like he wouldn't be allowed to do that, and it's just like, why would you do why? And it was just one of those things that just really annoyed me. And I've said it before that I would love to do a video about kind of authors who use sensationalist media in their books, and is it irresponsible and all of that. But it's something that I would have to think about a lot, and I don't really know if I'm brave enough to do it, but it is something that I just hate, those shitty journalist tropes is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I probably could get way into it, but it would just be a really big tangent, and I don't know if anyone wants to hear that. So yeah, It did resolve itself quite well. The end, I did enjoy how that was resolved. But yeah, it did annoy me every time this journalist and like the stories that he would write, and they were like real columnists. He wasn't even a news reporter, he was like a columnist, and so he was like injecting himself into every single story, and I was like that's a really weird way of reporting news all the time, if to have like all these major stories about this school shooting be like a columnist rather than just a straight up news story. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so anyway, I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it. It's like a 3.5 to a 4. I did really enjoy it. I think people want a slowed down, kind of more crime driven book rather than like a thriller. They might really enjoy this one. So yeah, everything I've read this week, please let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys again next time.